Welcome to our weekly roundtable discussion by Law Enforcement Coaching, where each week we have unscripted conversations on relevant topics for law enforcement and our first responder community. This week we talk therapy, coaching, and wellness practices with guest first responder psychologist Dr. Dara Rampersad. We appreciate you tuning in and hope you find some useful insights and information from these discussions.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us on another weekly roundtable. We have another special guest this week, but before I introduce him, I'm going to have some of our law enforcement coaching team introduce themselves, and then we are going to introduce Dr. Dara. So if you tune into these, first and foremost, Chris and I are the co-founders of Law Enforcement Coaching, and you can check us out and read all about us on our website. But let's start. Mike Lawson, do a quick little intro of yourself, please.
Yeah, my name's Mike Lawson. I did almost 24 years with the San Diego Sheriff's Department. The last 10 of those, I was a peer support coordinator and helped kind of start a full-time wellness unit for the Sheriff's Department. I retired March a couple of years ago, and that didn't last very long. 7 months later, I got picked up as a civilian for Chula Vista Police Department just outside of San Diego. And I am their first ever wellness coordinator. And I'm currently in that position and love it.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kevin, unmute yourself and you go.
Morning. I'm Kevin Mede. I've been with the same sheriff's office here in Washington State for about 25 years. Part of my duties, I'm the wellness coordinator and the peer support team leader. And currently my rank is lieutenant assigned to patrol, and I'm just joining here. I'm also one of the master coaches here at Law Enforcement Coaching.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I love that we have a full wellness team for this conversation. And with that, Dr. Dara, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Tami. Thanks for having me, you guys. I'm Dara Rampersad. I'm a psychologist. I'm a first responder psychologist, and I work in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I'm based. But I have a footprint nationally in that I do training across the nation and sometimes out of the country as well. And then in my Blue Pass, which is my company, we provide services for first responders for therapy and mostly for extreme sorts of situations. So high in acuity sorts of trauma. And so post-traumatic stress disorder or any kind of complex issues that are taking place. And then, of course, the run-of-the-mill things tied along with that, substances, health issues, marital issues, child issues. We take care of that stuff. I'm fortunate in that I can't do this by myself, so I have a really phenomenal team. And my team is about 12 or 13 contractors now that work with Blue Pass. And they are phenomenal. And so I'm lucky to be able to, there's just some simple watchwords that we kind of guide ourselves by. And this was from a friend of mine who was a retired probation officer on Maui. And he says, help as many people as you can, as much as you can, as long as you can. And so that's what our entire umbrella is based off of. And that's why we do what we do at Blue Pass to serve our first responders.
I love that. We have so many similarities. We have Maui in common. But then also having an amazing team. And I think everybody is really heart-centered, mission-focused of like, let's help. I know my team, I know your team, we're not about the money. We're about, hey, how many people can we help? Whether that's a sworn officer, the civilian side, the family members, anyone, it's like, it's a total team effort. So I really am excited to have you on today. Before we get into like the meat and potatoes, one of the questions that I would love to dive into, we get asked all the time, what is the difference between coaching and therapy, psychology, the clinical side of things? And so I would like to hear from you, your take on the clinical side, and I'll kind of say, what we're doing with the coaching and how it just integrates together so well.
Yeah, it depends what levels people go to, right? So most people know on a bachelor's degree, which any kind of BA, BS degree, there's not much you can do. So as you get towards licensure for being a therapist, you are going to go towards a master's degree level, which is your base level. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but you have to have at least a master's degree, meaning that's a base that you have to have. And then you obtain licensure to be able to practice, to do therapy services generally, or testing. So you could be a psychometrist where you are just doing testing and assessment, or you could be someone that is involved in doing the therapy side of things, or research. That's a third option. So you don't need to obviously have a license to do research, but most people who do end up getting their master's degree and I have a lot of law enforcement folks that actually transition out of law enforcement and go back to get their master's degree so they could become therapists. And so they are pursuing some avenue of LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor, or an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, or an LMFT, which is licensed marriage and family therapist. Or they could be something else that I'm not thinking of right now. But these are your primary sorts of licensures that people will want to have practice to be able to see people for therapy. And the primary issue here, as far as being licensed, is that you are accountable to a board, to a behavioral health board, and that's across all states. And so the behavioral health board issues you a license to practice, and then they can also revoke that license, of course, disciplinary actions within if you cause any harm to people. And I think on both of our sides, neither of us want to cause harm to people, but sometimes harm does occur. And so, at least there is an accountability board that will put people in check for that on a licensure part of things. At my level, what I have done is I did do a master's degree. I did get my LPC. I was licensed in a few different states. And then I decided to pursue my PhD. And so my PhD, then I got licensed as a psychologist. And I first got licensed in Hawaii as a psychologist. When I lived there, we overlapped that, Tami. When we lived on Maui. And then I got licensed when I moved here to Arizona. And then one of the coolest things that happened during COVID is, or just towards the end of COVID, is that they started to do this, what do they call it? It's a PsyPact for license level psychologists. And so it's all doctoral level psychologists, where you are licensed across, say, I think now it's like 30 something states. And so if you have a licensure in Arizona, where I am, or not in Hawaii yet, but in Arizona, then you could practice in about 30 something states and do telehealth with people. The coolest thing about that is that it has reduced barriers to people being able to access licensed psychologists across the country. And so I of course, there's a piece of it that's a racket, right? I mean, we all have to pay these, exorbitant dues every year to be able to be licensed. And of course, we have to do these CMEs or CEUs, continuing education credits. And so for different states, they require different levels and numbers of hours of doing that. We complete 40 hours generally every 2 years to be able to continue to have our license, and they have to be in specific areas. And so some of those specific areas will include things like domestic violence. They will include substance abuse. They could include other areas within your expertise that you practice in to be able to continue having that license. So you have to demonstrate that every 2 years. And I continue to hold my LPC license in Colorado. And then I have my psychologist license here in Arizona and in Hawaii still. So I think generally that's kind of the umbrella of it for licensure stuff. And then you're the expert in coaching, so I'll let you say about that part.
Well, and we saw a kind of a gap between peer support and clinical therapy. We talk about the stigma about officers, seeking out help, talking about their feelings and all of that. I know that we've seen the shift in the last few years. That stigma is slowly starting to go away. I think more and more people are starting to be like, hey, we need to have these conversations. There's nothing taboo or weak about seeking out a therapist or a psychologist or seeking out some kind of help. So I really love that we're all on this wave together to see the shift in wellness and the culture. We created coaching. It's kind of hybrid version of life coaching, but it's specific for law enforcement. There are all sorts of different coaching companies out there. We took a couple different blueprints and we created something so that we have strict quality control. And all of our coaches are thoroughly vetted. They're all law enforcement professionals. So we really go into that cultural competence, cultural experience so that they understand. And then we put them through a rigorous coach training program that they have to pass. And then the same, we kind of mirror a few of the things as therapy and psychology. We have an ethics and integrity board to make sure that everybody's up. We have our reporting protocols and all of that in place. But what coaching is really doing, if someone is not quite at the level where they're needing to sit down and talk to a licensed therapist or a psychologist, or they can't quite get in because there's a wait for a lot of them, they can work with a coach and talk to us. We love to work in harmony with the clinical side. So we can be like, hey, you know what, this is a little out of the realm of coaching. Have you thought about talking to a psychologist or a therapist? Have you talked to your peer support? So we kind of have been deemed like the middle ground, the cushion, so that there's somebody else in there where it's not, okay, I don't want to talk to somebody in my department, but I'm not quite ready for therapy. Or maybe it's not an issue that they're needing, necessarily therapy. The promotional process or in the academy, and they're just like, hey, I don't know what to do here. They can talk to one of our coaches that is a law enforcement professional. So we're bridging the gap and then working and collaborating with different people where it's like, okay, again, mission focused. We're here to help whoever it is the best ways that we can. So with that little segue, I think where we could all start is really just talking about what are some best practices for stress management.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say too, just to add on to what you said, one of the cool things about what you and Chris have started, and then your guys as well, is that you guys offer, in my view, and I could be wrong, an external peer support component that internal departments may not have or they don't want to utilize. And so, having the peers that have been through all this stuff is a huge benefit, I think, to departments that you guys provide. And I could be wrong, but I see some head shaking, so it sounds like I'm on the right track.
You're spot on. And that's one of the things, and I know Chris can kind of jump in on this, but especially with smaller departments, we've seen that, yes, peer support, and we have 2 peer support people here, so we can pick your guys' brains. But a lot of times, officers don't necessarily want to go and talk to somebody in-house because there is still that, is it going to affect my career? Are people going to look at me differently? Or maybe they don't necessarily trust the person, or whatever the case is, they don't necessarily want to talk in-house. So it is an external where it's like, hey, we understand the ABCs. We understand the stressors, the realities, the realistic, tangible takeaways that we can help provide to a client of like, this will actually work for you. But I don't want to do all the talking. So Mike, you're in it right now. So how have you found, it's working within your department?
Yeah, so just having somebody neutral that you could talk to. I mean, the stress management, a lot of it is just getting it out. I'm just being honest. Since I've been here, I have an office that I'm in right now. People have come in, closed the door, and we have those conversations. And people have told me flat out, Mike, we trust you. You come from another department. We like our people in our department, but I just feel safe talking to you. And it's kind of been compared to kind of like a chaplain in the police department, just having that neutral person where you feel comfortable and you're having those confidential conversations.
Kevin, how about you?
I think it's important that folks realize, or they recognize, it's not about me, it's not about us, it's about not my advice or here's what I want you to do. It's what do you need and what are your options. It's really taking a step back and helping that person explore what is available to you, what are the things maybe you didn't consider that somebody from outside the situation can see, and help them kind of shepherd them through that process. It's not a advice column or a a magic 8 ball will help someone decide, but we're there to help give that outside perspective and frame it in a way that, we've walked through many situations. Our coaching team has a great deal of experience through numerous different types of situations and circumstances, and to be able to draw on that and say, well, what worked for you? What was helpful? What was not helpful? And I think that's something that really sets coaching apart from just the peer support angle or formalized therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, if I were to add in my 2 cents here on the stress management side of things, I would tell every officer, is this program geared only towards law enforcement or to other first responders too?
It's open to all first responders. We all come from law enforcement, so we stay in our lane of what we know,
Yeah.
but it's coaching and therapy for everybody.
Well, so let's stick with law enforcement for now, because I know firefighters tend to do a better job at this. Go for a physical every year. Go for a physical. Like, I know so many guys that just don't even go for physicals because they just don't prioritize it, and we see the results of this stuff when things creep up over time and they could have caught it earlier on. And so I think going for a physical every year is really important as far as wellness, because your wellness is composed of so many parts. It's not only wellness at work, but your wellness at home is super important, right? And so taking care of your family, taking care of your health, taking care of all of these things that cause stresses in your life that are auxiliary to your job, that you need in order to be able to do your job properly. And folks just are not taking care of that stuff, Is your marriage healthy? Is your relationship healthy? How do you know it's healthy? Are arguments healthy? Absolutely. You guys probably have an argument once a week, but it feels good, sometimes it's important to have arguments because then you get these discussions out, and, if you're conflict avoidant, you're probably going to plan things up inside and then it's going to come out in another way, and so being able to express yourself, and I like what Mike said, is having that safe place to be able to express yourself, that you're not going to be judged, and you could essentially say whatever you want to say. And I've told many folks coming in for wellness visits with us, hey, I don't know if you were voluntold to be here or if you want to be here, but just use this hour to vomit. Like, just vomit on me. Like, tell me all of this stuff that's going on in your life, or the calls that you've been on, that you've been holding on to, that you don't share with anybody. Like, I'm the person that you could share that with. It's okay to do so. And it's always very productive. Is really helpful to have those kinds of conversations, because you asked about therapy and coaching, and I think that when you do first responder therapy is very different to traditional office therapy for depression and anxiety issues, and so I think that you guys do the exact same thing. Sometimes folks come in and we just shoot the shit, like that is what the entire time is. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and then it's true. Once you start to share, man, you feel better. You just start to feel better. You de-escalate yourself, and you, over time, just feel great, because you have somebody to speak with, Probably the greatest insult and compliment I received from a patient was that I'm like a prostitute, because I make him feel like I care about him, and then he pays me money, but we had a good laugh about that, though. But it's true, right? I mean, it's really great to be able to help people.
Well, you're right, doctor. And you speak about preventative maintenance. Officers or first responders, it is important for us to really stay on top of that preventative maintenance daily, right? The goal is to, no offense to you, doctor, but the goal is for me to never go see you, right?
Yep.
And but if I have to go see you, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you just bought a new car, right, or a new truck, whatever it might be, you've got to do preventative maintenance on that vehicle, because if you don't, in time, it's going to break down on you, right? The way I look at it between coaching and what you do, doctor, is coaching is like us doing the preventative maintenance. Check the tires, put gas in the car, do regular oil changes. Someday, you might develop a major issue in your vehicle that you're not going to be able to fix. Now you've got to take it into the shop and have it fixed. That's kind of like what you do, right? If we get to that point, hopefully we don't ever get to that point, but sometimes we might. And I will share with you guys, I met Dr. Dara years ago when I was still active duty, and I went to him. When you talk about the prostitute thing, that kind of brought up a lot of stuff. Of all things, right? The prostitute comment.
Hold on.
For the
I was
record,
in a-
Chris was never a prostitute.
So I was in a really bad place at this time in my career, in my life. And I went and I talked to you, doctor, and I love the way that you did your session, because you were holding me accountable for every word that came out of my mouth. So I couldn't go in there and just bitch and talk smack about my agency. I tried, but you wouldn't let me do that. You would come back to that, and then you would ask me, "Oh, tell me, why do you feel that way? What did they do to make you feel this way?" Right? You would ask me little questions like that. And after a while, I'm like, wait, I can't just sit here and you're not commiserating with me. Wait, this is not how this is supposed to work, right? And I really like the way you did our session. And I only had 2 sessions with you. But we resonated, right? You understood, and you were getting to the core of what I was dealing with. Well, I went to you a second time, and it was a great session, right? Went to you a third time. Now, this is why, part of the reason why I created, with Tami, law enforcement coaching. I went to you a third time, and I checked into the office, and the secretary said that you're no longer in the office, that you moved on. She didn't tell me where, did you start your own practice? Did you go to another company? She just said you were no longer in the office. Well, that was a huge disappointment to me, right? Because the office never gave me the heads up. So she asked me, can I schedule you with another therapist? And I said, no, I'm good. And I turned around and I walked out, never went back. And I was so disappointed. But what did I learn from that experience? I learned that I was becoming too dependent on you. I was resonating with you. I became dependent only after 2 sessions. And then I realized I can't be dependent on somebody, because that somebody might not always be there, just like in this case. And that's where coaching techniques really started to come to fruition for me, because now I'm looking at what can I do daily in my life to help balance me out, so that I'm not dependent on somebody else, like a therapist. No disrespect to you or any other therapist. And that's kind of where coaching started. One, the way I run my session, you inspired me. I don't want to say I stole your style, but I stole your style. I love the way you did it, right? Because again, it's the accountability, making your client accountable for everything they say, not just allowing them to just bitch and whine and commiserate. You're not going to commiserate with them. But again, because of that experience, doctor, that is why law enforcement coaching really began, because of that. Because you were that good, and then you were gone.
Thanks,
So
Chris.
it's a compliment. I'm not trying to talk back to you or anything.
No,
I'm giving you a major compliment.
yeah, I really appreciate that, Chris. I didn't know that that had happened actually to you, and I really apologize, and I'm sorry to hear that happen. There was a contract that I was with a company that you went to, which wasn't my company, and so when the contract no longer got renewed, then Blue Pass kicked in, and I didn't realize that had happened anyway, because I didn't or wasn't allowed to be able to contact people to take people from that company. So it just is what it was. And I love that company very much. And I know who you're talking about, but it was a matter of the way that it shook out with the company, unfortunately. So I apologize that happened to you as collateral damage, but I mean, great things came from it, right?
And no need to apologize, because had it not been for that,
Yeah.
law enforcement coaching might not have even have been created, right? So thank you. I just wanted to thank you for that. So,
Thank you, brother.
It happened for a reason too, because that, no disrespect to you, Chris, but you're a true cop. Like, so many stubborn men, particularly, but across the board, you have one experience. It's not even a bad experience. You just have one thing that rubbed you the wrong way, and then that's it. It's like, nope, I tried therapy, it didn't work for me. Tried coach, didn't like it. And there's such a, I tried it, it didn't work. And so then nobody does anything after that. And it's like, whoa. it's like, just because you went and had, I always talk about tacos. It's like, just because you tried one taco and you didn't like it doesn't mean you don't like tacos. Like, you just didn't like that one. Like, keep trying things. And having a full web. It's not just, hey, I have a therapist. Hey, I have a coach. Hey, I go to, my chaplain or church. It's okay, great. And let's throw in some acupuncture. Let's do some massage. Let's have a personal trainer. Like, wellness is not just one road. It is a whole web of different things that you throw in at different times. And especially depending on what you have going on. And I just want to say, before I move on from this, because I love the full circle that we all came into, because I know when I reached out to you, it was because I was trying to help with after the Maui fires, and I was connected to you. I had no idea that you knew Chris. And, it was like this full, like, everything happens for a reason. There's a reason that we're all here and connected. So I love that. Yeah. Well,
well, and I would say, I don't know if you guys have felt this way too in your careers, but I know for me, I'll speak for me. I felt selfish going to the gym. I felt selfish taking care of myself. I felt selfish going for a massage. I felt, I just felt selfish, and so I didn't take care of myself for a long time, and I have to wait to prove it, But I'll tell you that when I did realize that, I could do both, I could take care of my family, plus I could take care of myself, plus I could take care of everybody else that I take care of, which is a lot of people. Plus I could run a business, plus I could have a second job. I could do it. I could do it all if I balance things properly, but keep me involved in it too, So going to the gym, starting back to gym a couple of years ago, that was a big deal because, I had put that off for a long time. And make excuses for why I didn't want to go, right? And of course, when you don't go, then you become even lazier, and then you don't want to go, and it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy on a loop, right? And then I started to incorporate back massage, and so I get a massage every few weeks, and then I also get chiropractic done. And so I tell my chiropractor, I said, you are part of my wellness plan. I tell my massage therapist, you are part of my wellness plan. So I started to develop a wellness plan for myself because I needed it. I'm lucky that I have a healthy relationship with my wife for 22 years. I'm very fortunate. Very fortunate. We have a daughter that's healthy, and we don't have a lot of issues going on in the house. So the house is very stable. Thank God, but, not everybody has that. But then, I was telling some folks this the other day too, and I know that people disagree with me on this, but I don't go out to bars. I don't think that a married man has any business going out to a bar, but that's me, right? And so that's me. That's how I feel. I don't see that I need to go play golf with a whole bunch of men drinking afterwards and doing stupid stuff. I don't need to go to strip clubs with guys. I don't need to do a whole bunch of stuff that would lead me down a path that is going to be a negative path to my family, because I have to maintain that my family is my retirement plan. Everything that I do is for us and as a group to be able to make it as good as we can later on. Now, I don't plan to do everything in retirement because I don't know how long I'll be alive for. So we try to do things and integrate it into every day. Every year we do stuff like Kevin said, going to Kauai and doing other things like that. It's important not to wait for retirement because our lives are a balance of time, money, and health, right? And so those things tend to go wacky on us. At some point, most of us, when we're young, we don't have a lot of money, so you can't do a lot of cool trips. And then you have to balance that time and health. So, not to speak too much more on this, but is really like prioritizing yourself, making sure that you are important too. Cops, for too many eons of decades, have put everybody else before themselves. And I know what that's like because I'm a helper too, and so we have to make sure that we know that we are just as important, and it's okay for us to take a spot in the line that's not in the back every single time.
Doctor, you hit it. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
I think that so many times people in our profession equate their wellness with their job performance. I'm well enough. I'm getting the job done. I'm pulling down numbers. I'm getting these stats. I got this promotion or specialty assignment, and they keep in the back of their mind, They have an awareness like, I'm not feeling great. I'm not peak capacity or whatever. But when things slow down, I will. When things get better, when I get this promotion, when I get this new assignment, after next squad rotation, then I will do these things. And that horizon just keeps getting pushed farther and farther and farther. So you never stop and acknowledge that. And it's easy to just keep pushing forward, dealing with other people's problem and other people's issues until you are forced at some capacity to face your own.
Mhm.
And I know that from experience that
Mhm.
it's that old saying, make time for wellness or sickness will make time for you.
Mhm.
And it's important that we understand what wellness is. It's not just killing it at the job or just crushing it. It's like I said, all those other things, and the job needs to be a job, an important job, but it's just a job at the end of the day.
Yeah, 40 hours a week, you're Lieutenant Meade, but the rest of the time, you're Kevin, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you go home, you're Kevin. We can't forget that. Doctor, you talked about we don't prioritize ourselves because that is the law enforcement, that is the mindset for law enforcement. And I would say for first responders, we follow the priorities of life. We put innocent people first, then we put the life of the bad guy, and then we put innocent people first, then ourselves, and then the bad guy. And if we go through an entire career where we're always focusing on other people first
Mhm.
and forgetting our own safety, well, we get into that pattern of thought, that pattern of life. And so we do put things on the back burner, right? Things that we used to love to do, right? Like going to the gym. And you're right, Kevin. We look at what we do in our career, that's success, right? I promoted to sergeant to lieutenant. I'm in a detective. So I'm successful, but my home life is crap, right? Why? Because I've neglected my home life. I've neglected my own personal needs for this career. And, that's something that we have to have that self-awareness. Cops are great. We're the best problem solvers on the planet. We will solve a problem within seconds. We can arrive on scene at the most chaotic scene, and within seconds of arrival, we will solve the problem. The problem in law enforcement is we don't know we have a problem. So we have to be able to have that self-awareness.
So yeah, for me, it took me about 14 years into my career where I just made a change. And I do have a spiritual side. And I look back when I started going back to church, started meeting some cool guys. I started a men's group, support group, just with guys that are married with kids. And I started surrounding myself with mentors, chaplains, 2 chaplain friends. And it just kind of happened naturally. I didn't like read a book and say, this is what you had to do. But I look back at those 10 years and, I used to coach my son's teams and that was great. But I noticed one of my sons had a problem with me when I, yelled at him. He saw dad, not coach. So I just stopped coaching. And it was one of the best things I ever did is with my older son's relationship. And I'm still working at all this stuff. Like you have to work at it. The working out, that wasn't a priority before. I made it a priority 10 years ago, and I keep doing that since. Paddleboarding is huge for me. Pickleball is huge for me. And, sometimes when we're in the job, obviously I have 2 perspectives now that I'm retired. When we're in the job, I used to go paddleboarding. I used to play pickleball, and we don't do it, and we just beat ourselves up. And it's nobody's fault. I think we go, and then we just don't have time, and we make up excuses like the doctor said, and we're pretty good at that, making those excuses. But man, that was game changer for me and my relationship with my wife. We started to go to counseling proactively, and even the counselor one time said, what's wrong with you guys? Everything seems pretty okay. And I told him, I'm on the peer support team and just trying to proactively do some counseling. And he was like, oh my gosh, if everybody did that, he goes, the people I see, they're about to get divorced. They're about to jump off the bridge, so to speak. So yeah, and you have to work at it too. And I look at again, a different perspective now. Most of the cops, we do an awesome job of taking care of business, going to a scene and controlling that scene. And we forget about like controlling our scene, like our life, just trying to deal with all the stresses. And man, if we could just start at that and we just teaching it and, through coaching, like we're just one kind of avenue where we could kind of get, again, like Kevin said, we're not giving advice per se. We're just, talking to them, giving them that safe place, and then helping them with their goals. And, I never really had that through most of my career, but once I found those people, again, mostly chaplains, those mentors, it was game changer.
And it's tough, right? Because you could go into a recruit academy and you could tell the recruits this stuff, and everybody's like, yeah, whatever. That'll never happen to me. That's always somebody else, right? They're great. And that's the whole thing, is like, you don't know, like if you were to take psychological testing right now to get into a department, it'll be very different if you took that test 10 years into your job, 15 years into your job, 20, like you change, man. This is like permanent changes that people have into their psyche, right? And based on their experiences. And Kevin is right too. I mean, you are just a number, and you are an operational need. And people need to realize that your role, your position, you as a person, you're an operational need that department has to fill that box to be able to say box number 12350 is Kevin Mede right now. But guess what? If Kevin drops of a heart attack, God forbid, knock on wood, or something else happens, right?
Soon.
Then guess what? We're going to fill that with Chris Zamora because he's the next candidate in for that box. And so that's exactly how it is. And for any cop that has been through an IA, and you've gone through the ringer on this stuff, you realize quickly that you become just a number when, peer support if you're lucky, might be the only people checking in on you. And if you happen to have a therapist or a coach at that time, right, to be able to help call you and check in on you for your wellness. But there are structural boundaries that exist that you may not hear from your sergeant, your lieutenant, your commanders. And next thing you know, you start to feel very isolated in a very cold, dark place. And if you have 2 or 3 of those IAs, then it becomes even worse, because now you start to feel like, am I not good at this job? They're telling me that, I'm screwing up so many times. And, you start to have resentment towards the job. You start to have resentment towards people you work with, et cetera, et cetera. And it just starts building up these scars over time.
That's a great point, Doctor. The police department, I always thought the police department was like my family, right? And if there was something wrong with me, my family would come and help me. And then there was something wrong with me and they didn't come, right? But here's the thing. The police department is not a living, breathing organism. It is a building that's made up of iron, concrete, drywall, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it is. That's what the police department is. It's the men and women within that agency that you build relationships with. And, at the end of the day, the department, they put in place this system that if one of us ends up not being at work, they got to continue operations. Right? Mm-hmm. So we can't take it personal if we get replaced immediately, from whatever position. That's called public safety. That has to be in place. So that makes it even more important for us to focus on our own wellness. Mm-hmm. We should never expect an agency, it's their responsibility for my wellness. Absolutely not. That is incorrect. It's my responsibility for my wellness. If an agency takes that proactive approach to put certain things in place to help their officers, to help their employees, then that's awesome. That is great, right? That agency recognizes if our employees are of sound mind and they're good, then they can come to work, right? They can be here and they can provide public safety. But the reality is they don't have to do that, right? Mm-hmm. It's important for us to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Chris.
What do you guys think? I mean, and not just stigma and perceived judgments, but what do you guys think the biggest obstacles for individuals to actually take the steps to talk to peer support, to talk to a coach, to talk to a therapist, to actually take those steps to reach out. What do you think some of those blocks are?
I think it's people believe that they're alone. They're unique like everyone else. Where I should be able to handle this. No one else is having a problem. No one else is as stressed out as I am. So I'm going to go along to get along because I don't want to be, look like I can't handle my shit, or, I can't take it, or I can't, because then I won't be eligible for this next promotion, assignment, whatever it may be. Right. When in reality, everyone's just tucking that away and pushing that down, and everyone deals with stress in different ways. Some people wear it differently than others, but that stress will get to everyone in some manner or some degree.
I agree. If I had to give my 3 words that I tell all my cops that I train, is things that cause death: pride, ego, and complacency. And those 3 things cause a lot of problems, and end up leading to a lot of death and injury, And so if people could overcome their pride and just stop being complacent with where they are is okay enough, and they could control that ego to go ask for help, through coaching, through therapy, through a pastor, whoever else that you connect with, I think that that would lend to better health.
Yeah, for me, being a wellness coordinator of a department, I see it firsthand. It's that culture change, right? We're all we've done this, some of the people that are in command, they've been around a long time, right? But this wellness movement is a change, and change is hard sometimes for law enforcement, first responders, government agencies. I get that, and I see it firsthand. But, we got to get the people at the top to kind of model some of this behavior, whatever that is. Do some therapy sessions, like be open about that. Talk about what you do to keep healthy. Like that needs to get passed on to, the people below them, and passed on to, the frontline officers. And Tami's right. Like it's 10 years ago, like this was, I don't want to say there was no such thing, but it was just beginning. But man, it's like a wildfire now. Like, and I see it. I go to trainings and conferences all the time, and it's happening. And it's cool to just network with other agencies. And sometimes they're like, "Oh my gosh, like you have a peer support? Like we don't even have a peer support unit." I'm like, "What? Like that's insane." But that's reality, right? So networking with other departments, and Tami and Chris know this. Again, all the conferences I go to, it's awesome, and that movement's happening. There's more and more conferences happening, and it's awesome.
Well, that's perfect segue. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Well, if you got a segue, I don't want to interrupt.
I have a segue because somebody has a conference coming up, so we can talk about the conference really quick.
We do. We have our Blue Pass Health and Wellness Conference for first responders coming up on September 19th and 20th. Thanks for mentioning that. And I'm glad that, Mike, you immerse yourself in this, because our guys deserve it. They deserve someone who's passionate. They deserve somebody that cares. That's the work that you guys are doing, right? That we do, all of us are doing, to try to make sure that we are connecting with the folks and giving them the best skills, knowledge, experiences possible that we gain. And I hope that our conference, every year we hold this conference, and I'll tell you why I kept it online. Of course, COVID started it, right? So it was COVID's fault to initiate it to being online. But when I started to think about it, I was like, why wasn't it always online? I should have kept it online. I first started these conferences in 2018. I had 2 conferences. They were both in-person conferences. 2019, I had an in-person conference. And then 2020, of course, I transitioned across to online. And I was thinking to myself, I want to reach the patrol officer who has no budget to go on trainings. You know exactly what I mean. There are a select group of people that always get selected from the training division to go to these conferences, and then their job is to come back and disseminate information, which they hardly ever do, right? And so I wanted to make sure that even if a person was on patrol, they could flick on the conference and they could watch whatever segments they could, and then boom, they go to a call. Come back in if they want to. If they don't want to, that's fine. I record it all. So at the end of it all, if they want to be off duty and watch this stuff, they could see it for free. And so that's why I keep this conference free, and that's why I keep it online. I want to be able to reach people that have zero budget and no selection to be able to go to get conference training, and to give them post credits for it. So people are going to qualify to get post credits for attending these conferences and it's free. I mean, that's a great price, right? So hopefully people will value this stuff that we bring. This year I'm really excited about a buddy of mine from England. He was in charge. He's a commander, a chief inspector in charge of royalty protection detail service. And he went through the death of the Queen, and he was in charge of all of the operations for her funeral. And then he was in charge of all of the operations for the King coming in for the coronation. And so running a large scale operation like that for making sure that things are safe is a huge deal. So Chris is going to present on that piece, my other buddy Chris. And so then we have an ex-friend of mine from Australia, Matt, who's going to come in and talk about what's it like doing policing as a sergeant. He was on for about 30 years as a sergeant, and then he left service, and what policing has been like. The overall theme and spin of everything is people will be sharing experiences, and then we're going to have a resiliency component to it. So what did they do and how did they become resilient after their experiences? And Tami, you would like this piece, but I actually will have a piece on Maui. So we're going to discuss our Maui fires for the first time. I'm going to discuss my role in that, as well as our dispatcher, our CID guy that was doing bodies with us. We have the patrol sergeant that was on that night that was helping to pull people out of the fires. And so it's going to be a very dynamic conversation. I hope it's going to be a lot of trauma, but this is the first time that any of us are going to talk about this stuff in a public forum. But I think it's also going to be super helpful for a lot of people to realize, as we had said earlier on, people are not alone. They're not alone. Like, we all go through hard times, and we all could get through it too if we work together and if we trust each other to depend on each other.
Great example to show people that you're normalizing talking, right?
Yeah.
If we can normalize talking, we can vent. Not a big deal when it's time that I need to go talk to somebody like you. Doctor, because you mentioned the Maui fires and everything that you saw out there, what keeps you balanced? Like, who do you talk to help you maintain that level of balance so that other peer support members can also kind of learn from that?
Yeah, it's funny. When I came back, I had nightmares for like 10 nights straight. And then on my second deployment, if you'll call it that, it was self-deployment. I came back, I had nightmares for about 3 nights. And so I knew what was going on. And so I was lucky enough to have the knowledge of I have to go through the nightmares and the bad dreams to be able to heal, because there were a lot of unprocessed things. You're working 16, 18-hour days in the field in the burn zone, and you're pulling bodies and remains of people, and you're working with teams on this stuff with FEMA. And everybody's seeing really bad things and smell. I mean, the smell of death was so pungent. I mean, that was that way for well over a month. You just couldn't get rid of the smell of death, and so to answer your question, my wife was a huge help, because every morning I'd wake up, I'd tell her what my dreams were. I would talk to her about stuff. She's a psychologist as well, so I'm lucky that I have the in-house version of therapy. But but she's great, and she's able to give me just different thoughts and other things like that on what's going on, or sometimes just listen. I have a friend who's a negotiator that I teach negotiation school with, Ben, and Ben says, I tell 10 people my story. So he says, that's how he gets rid of his trauma. So I was like, do those 10 people want to hear your story, Ben? But, some spouses do, some spouses don't, right? I'm lucky that I have that ability to do so. And we'll talk more in depth about that stuff too during a conference.
Yeah,
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're attending and sharing that out, and the whole Maui thing. I think it's been it's been a year. It's been a year, and a lot. There's just been there's so many layers to it. So I think it's good because now what we're going to start seeing is, I do think there's going to be a lot more outward conversation and starting the healing process, and everything goes. I know that they're starting to get ready to break ground and rebuild, and the banyan tree is healing, everything is healing, and we know Maui is a healing vortex. Like, it can rip you apart and strip you down of everything, but Maui and Hawaii has a way of like being like, hey, this is the path we're actually supposed to be on. So I think, having those conversations, I look forward to, being a fly on the wall to listen to all of that. And I just thank you for going out there and doing everything that you've done for them. Okay. Still, I'm the emotional one of the group always.
Well, Doctor, it's, thank you for sharing that and the personal things that you experience as a result of that, the nightmares, because, that right there shows that nobody, as experienced as you are, nobody's immune to this, right? Nobody. So it's normal if we experience something like this throughout our career. We're not alone.
No, absolutely. This stuff could happen to anybody. You just fed the right number of ingredients for long enough, and then, you present with normal reactions and normal responses. What do we see in peer support, right? I mean, I've been doing peer support now for 24 years, right? And what do we teach in peer support? You're going to experience normal reactions to an abnormal situation. And boy, I tell you, we've run across some really abnormal situations in our careers, haven't we? So we all have a lot of normal reactions, but sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to get past and through that stuff.
Well, and with the stigma that everybody talks about, I know a lot of people are afraid of being judged. And you have to realize, anybody that's judging you, and this isn't just with trauma and wellness, this is in business, this is in life. If somebody's judging you, it's because they haven't actually been there. They haven't experienced what you've experienced, or if they haven't figured out how to actually move through it and succeed through it. Anybody like in the business world, when you're starting out in business, if you have somebody judging you or telling you, oh, you shouldn't do it, or you should just keep your day job or whatever, they have not actually been in business. If you have somebody that understands business, they're going to be like, hey, it's going to be rough. Keep going. Here's some things to look out for. It's the same with wellness. We're all wellness, professionals, not because we all went to, I have degrees and stuff on the wall, but it's not because I went and took some classes. We have all been through some shit, but we have figured out, I don't want to stay, I'm not a victim. I don't want to stay in this woe is me and let it dictate my life. I want to figure out tools that help me get through that. And I think one of the other things too, you had said, feeling like you couldn't put yourself first. We have the guilt as well. And I think first responders have maybe even a subconscious guilt of, it's not okay to be happy because of everything that you guys witness, everything that you see, how heavy the world can be, the criminals, the senseless crimes, all of this stuff. So then we get this belief of like, well, I shouldn't be happy because of this, and this. But as we've all said before, it's okay for us. It's okay for us to be happy. It's okay for us to be healthy, to put ourselves first, because then we can be of service. We are of no service if we can't take care of ourselves. My job.
So true. Yeah, so true. You're right.
So we're pretty much at the conclusion of this. So I always like to summarize and just bring it back around. So really quick, what are some key takeaways that if somebody were to just pop into the end of this episode, what is your advice or guidance to those that are tuning in?
I'll go first. Again, back to what I said, those things that you love to do, that you used to do, I would simply bring those back, whatever that is. Working out, again, for me, paddleboarding is my go-to. That's where I get to be out in the water, and that's my time. And just creating space for that, finding time for that, waking up a little bit early, like whatever you have to do is get back to those things you love to do.
I would say check in with yourself like you check in with your buddies. How are you doing? What do you do to take care of yourself? And you need to honestly answer that question. And it needs to have substance. If the answer is nothing or very little, that's up to you to change, and it needs to be prioritized.
I would say kind of along those same lines as for the individual, you have to be honest with yourself. So you have to really maintain that self-care and that preventative maintenance daily. You've got to be there. For the agency, you have to make it clear what is your wellness continuum. What resources do you have to offer your people? Because sometimes agencies kind of take that for granted. They think, oh, their employees know exactly what's being offered, and the employees don't. They don't know that there's peer support. What is the role of peer support? What is the role of the wellness coordinator? If agencies are contracting with us, law enforcement coaching, what is coaching? What can that do for you? Doctor, for you, who can they go talk to? A mental health professional. What counselors are available, right? You've got to establish that wellness continuum, and everybody has to know what it is. EAP. We always hear EAP. That's the first thing that most departments say is we have EAP. Well, what does that mean? Well, we don't know. That's a problem, right? But you've got to open those lines of communications. Here are the resources that we have. You've got to spell it out for them. You've got to cop proof it. And I say that not to demean cops, but we're great at listening. We're great at following orders. So if you tell us, here are your contacts for these different wellness institutions or agencies, companies, whatever it might be, we will follow directions. We will go and we will reach out. But if we don't know it exists, how do we know where to go, right? So again, it's open communication.
I love it. I would add something that I hadn't said before, which is, for anybody that has been diving, deep sea diving, when you go and you dive, you have a dive buddy, right? So I would urge people to have a buddy that they trust, that knows them well. And then if they start to slip, so my wife does this for me, she would say, hey, this is what I'm noticing. And my goal is to believe her. If I'm being an a-hole and she says it, I need to stop and think and not be immediately defensive, but take into account the feedback that I'm getting to incorporate it, to realize maybe I am taking on too much right now. Maybe my stress is too high. What can I do in my wellness plan to start de-stressing, right? So it could be, either working out, it could be going for, as I said before, chiropractic work, massage, doing stuff, chatting with a friend, playing the guitar, doing something, right? So I need to know what my wellness plan is comprised of. And then when I get the feedback, go to my wellness plan and then start incorporating some things, as Mike is saying, paddleboarding and other things like that.
And my 2 cents is, don't knock it until you've tried it. Don't say, I don't like therapy. I don't like coaching. It's not for me. That's like my kid telling me that they don't like a certain flavor of ice cream. How do you know until you've tried it? And then if you try one and it's like, I'm not sure, try somebody else, try another, there's different flavors for everybody out there. So find what works for you. Therapy, we have people that were like, nope, I don't want to work with coaching. I want the clinical side. Beautiful. Are you actually working with the clinical side? Take those steps. And just make sure that you're showing up for yourself and you're talking to somebody, whoever that may be. And also, because one of the feedbacks we had, and I crack up at this comment all the time, I talk to 2 people and you're not one of them. Okay. And what happens when those 2 people aren't available? You need to have a network. Also knowing who is going to answer the phone at 2:00 in the morning. When the clinical side is not available, the professional sides are not available, your friends, your partner is sleeping and your mind is getting loud, who is going to answer the phone? Have that plan, not when you're in crisis mode. Already know what your plan is for that preventative maintenance. So on that note, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. It's great to have you, and hopefully we can have you on again.
Thank you.
And for everybody that's tuning in, if you want to know, well, I'm going to leave a couple links in the comments. I'm going to leave the link for the conference that's coming up. So if you want to be part of that, again, like we said, it's free. It's about getting the information out there. There's always a takeaway. The conferences are great. Please share that out. And same with our message, share it out, because somebody needs to hear what we have to say somewhere out there. So thank you all for tuning in, and until next week.